Coffee is a big part of my day. Not only does it help me get through the morning, but I just really love the taste of good quality beans. Trade is a subscription service that brings great coffee from indie roasters all over the country right to your door. Tell Trade what you typically like, whether it's espresso or single origins or even decaf, even how you like to make your coffee, and they will recommend the right beans for you. Or you can just choose from over 450 different coffees. Then you select how often you'd like the coffee delivered to you. Shipping is always free, by the way. And if you need to skip a week or so, just do that. You can do it. No charge at all. Then pick back up when you're ready to get beans delivered to your door again. Go to unitedwedrink.com/trade to get started with Trade today and start getting some of the best coffees in the country delivered to your door. That's unitedwedrink.com/trade. The opinions and statements in this podcast do not represent those of the host's employers, coworkers, family, or imaginary friends. Now enjoy the show.
Happy hour? More like amateur hour. Welcome to United We Drink.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the United We Drink podcast right here on unitedwedrink.com, as well as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and wherever fine podcasts are found. My name is Mike Urevich, and I am here by myself, so you know that means we have a guest. Yes, we have a guest. We are going to be joined very shortly by our friend Craig Thorn. He is a co-host of the BAOS Podcast, a Canadian podcast about beer. He is from Ontario, the Toronto area, and we have him on to talk a little bit about the craft beer scene up there in Canada. We really don't cover a lot of what's going on there because we don't really know what's going on there. So it's nice to have someone who is very familiar and very active in the Ontario and Quebec brewing scene. He really lets us know what's going on there, and we compare it a little bit to America and Florida in general, because strangely enough, Craig has a little bit of a connection with Florida as well. He likes it down here. He is a strange person. It was just recently down here spending some time with his girlfriend, and we do a little bit of talk about what is his thoughts on the Florida beer scene in comparison to Canada and all of that. We talk a little bit about hip hop, and by we, I mean him and Kevin. I'm not super well versed in hip hop. I know what I like. That's about it. But it's a fun conversation. We really hope that you enjoy it. There are some points in the show where he breaks up a bit. It can be maybe a little bit annoying, but we feel like it's not that bad to where you can't really follow what he's talking about. Hopefully it doesn't bother you. We didn't think that it was that bad of an issue, but if you know me, you know I can be a little picky on our audio editing and quality here. But in the meantime, we hope that you enjoy this conversation that we have with Craig Thorn of the BAOS Podcast.
Actually looks remarkably like you.
I would say twins.
Twinsies.
I'm not even sure.
I have twins, so I'm an authority on this. I can see when people look the same.
I take that. I'm gonna run with that. I'm the bear. Let's fucking go, boy. Oh, can I cuss, by the way? Are we allowed to cuss, or is that
Yes.
Yeah.
It's encouraged.
You're the bear. You're the bear. So
this-
you're
I'm the-
re-debuting second season coming up here soon on FX in America. I don't know what you would see that show on.
What's the
in
show
the Great
called?
White North. The Bear.
Oh, the bear.
It's
I haven't seen it either.
you haven't seen it? Oh, it's about like a guy running a Chicago beef sandwich shop. It's really good. What's his name? Jeremy White something or another guy who was on Shameless. Whatever.
This should be the start of the show, starting with something that we don't understand, that we don't know what we're talking. This is good. This is
keeping it in.
Yeah, keep it in.
So thanks for joining us, Craig.
It's an honor and a pleasure, boys. Thank you for having me. Excited to hang out, crush beer, some shit.
So before you tell us a little bit about yourself and about your podcast, what are you drinking?
Very conveniently, people won't be able to see this, but this is the latest collab we just did here for the brewery called Cinquième Baron. They're in Quebec, so just across the bridge in the Quebec side from Ottawa, which is the capital of Canada. For those folks who don't know, we did a beer called Straya, which is kind of a nickname for Australia, and it's an Aussie Extra Pale Ale, which is a style that's kind of popular there. We used all Australian hops, Victory Creek Galaxy, and Eclipse. Only had it for the first time last night, so this dropped I think last week, and I just had to get it shipped out. Pretty damn happy with it. It's sick. I haven't had too many Extra Pale Ales. Have you guys had that style at all? Is it common down there?
Extra Pale Ale?
Yeah.
I feel like 420 was always marketed as an extra pale ale as opposed to an IPA for a while. But I've heard of the Australian extra pale ale as a style, like it's like in BJCP or the World Beer Cup GABF style guidelines. But I can't say that I've ever had anything that I know is technically that.
Me neither.
No, it's definitely not common in Canada either. I don't even know how I'd even describe it. I don't know it's a pale ale, to be honest. Kind of like an American style, like sort of not quite as hectic as West Coast, like the American IPA category. This one's 6%. I feel like this is a little on the higher end of the scale for the style. It's just sort of like a juicy West Coast, little piney and resinous tropical fruit, little stone fruit type of vibe. It's cool. It's kind of good timing because I was going to drink something else tonight, and I was like, you know what?
How's the bitterness in that style?
Similar to an American IPA. So
okay.
Kind of another sip. I haven't had. Like I said, I only had it once, but like a bit more relaxed. It's not like punch you in your face, like rip your tongue off resin, like West Coast can be. Like,
so, but leaning more towards that than like the juicy New Englands.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and we
okay.
There is funny enough, like we have a non-profit called Link Up, and it's a longer story, but we do collaborations like 3 times a year, series of them. One of the breeze just behind me here happened to do a New England extra pale ale like 2 weeks ago for their collab beer for that one, which we've been because we don't deal with the collabs as far as like we don't interfere with what the breweries are making for that particular thing. Whereas this was like we came up with the name, the label, the concept, that type of thing. So I have had the New England version. We just opted for West Coast because I think if you and I would talk about it, the old what's the thing we did called again?
Oh, the Old Favorite Friday.
I knew it was old something. Like Old Favorite Friday. I chose High Life for that. So this love in West Coast, we had a big chat about West Coast. So I wanted to go with something like that just because I feel like this brewery particularly is one of the best in Canada, in my opinion, of this style. So I knew if anyone's going to nail it, let's do what, that with them. It's something fun,
It's a great style. I mean, we're actually, funny enough, we're recording this the day before or 2 days before we do a West Coast IPA with The Tank, a collaboration that we've been working on and Ralph put together. And one of the whole points is that we wanted to make an IPA with some bitterness and make it appropriate so that people didn't expect nothing but juiciness and tropical fruit. And we'll probably still get some people that are going to be mad at us because that is now what IPAs are supposed to be in the United States, at least.
Of course. I feel like in Florida, and I said this to you, I feel like in Florida, my experience was there was a lot more West Coast than I expected. And I felt that was probably more in the classic stuff that like, in the supermarkets and things like that with Too Hard and Highlight and I guess a lot of Funky Buddha stuff and whatever I saw, Stone, all those type of things. So it didn't feel like, I felt like the market was primed, but I guess you're probably referring to the folks who are, you buy an IPA, typically it's going to be a haze bomb. Like you have to actually now say, this is a West Coast or this is a That's going to be bitter.
Yeah, you have to identify that, or else you get yelled at.
I feel like the grocery store market down here is mostly like West Coast IPAs or like your traditional American IPAs, which I would associate more with like High Ally than West Coast. But like the Voodoo Ranger series of beers are all over grocery right now, and some of them are hazy, some are not. But like Hazy Little Thing from Sierra is probably the most preeminent hazy that you might find in grocery convenience store type of stuff.
Well, let me just clarify. What I was talking about wasn't necessarily what we're finding in grocery. And we just had, Craig, we just had a big episode talking about who we're selling to and the fact that are we super serving the craft beer aficionados and the people that line up for releases? Or are we talking about the people on the grocery store shelves? When it's really it's tough. You're divided in that. So yeah, when you're going towards that clientele, they might be more primed for a little more bitterness. But the people that are the haze boys that are going out there, they don't even know what that means anymore. You give them a Racer 5 from Bear Republic, and they would shrink and shrivel because of the bitterness quotient on that beer.
I was just going off of him saying that he was seeing more like traditional IPAs as opposed to the hazies out there. Like at my brewery, we do a year-round West Coast and we do a year-round red IPA. So like we do hazies from time to time, but we stick to like a red IPA is essentially like a West Coast, but with a little bit more malt character to it. So like that's what we're going for.
Your brewery, Mike?
I work for Copper Point. It's a brewery in Boynton Beach. We're about like 20-30 minutes north of Kevin's.
I know exactly where it is. We had an employee who used to live there, and we were just in Florida for a month, so we really analyzed the area out there. Tried to suss it all out. Okay, I will definitely check it out next time we get back. I went and saw Kev, which was great to see Boca briefly, see the brewery, but
that's the best way to see Boca is briefly.
I was disappointed I didn't get to check it out. I think it's old cool, man. The whole area is just fascinated with it. It's phenomenal.
So we have to get to the Florida beer scene. I think that's the first question we should ask, because you talking about like thinking that like Florida's dope goes against every fiber of Mike's being. But Mike, you want to mention what you're drinking? You got anything in front of you?
Yeah, I have. I'm actually drinking cider and spirits. I have a Stark. It is a 6-year anniversary cider from my friends at Plowman Ciders in Pennsylvania. And I also have some Costco tequila that Kevin turned our household onto a while back. This is the best tasting tequila I've ever had, and it's just like the Costco brand one. It doesn't have that big tequila punch in the face like they all do. So thank you for that, Kevin.
Always happy to suggest my alcohol to my friends to get them plastered. I am drinking a We Who Remain, the beer we did with Savage Life. We had Sam on here a few episodes back. This is an Imperial Pilsner that I just feel turned out really, really well. Big, malty, but clean enough. I mean, you have to have a good malt balance when you're looking for an Imperial Pilsner. You got to have some heft to it, but it finishes dry. And, it's an Imperial Pilsner, so it's now got 4 months on it, and still drinking really, really well. I think it'll hold up for at least a couple more months and really, really be delicious.
Awesome. We had that together, actually, at the brewery.
Yeah, that's one of the ones I wanted you to try.
Yes, loved it. And I got some to take back as well. So I will not sit on it.
Many of the things I gave you, I'm sure you could, but that definitely one that it was just weird for me because it's in a 750 bottle. It's not bottle condition like most of our 750s would be, and it's so rare for me to put a beer in a 750 and not be able to put it in my cellar for 4 years. And I actually have a vintage bottle list, and I'm like, part of me sees that extra 1 case laying around. I'm like, oh, I gotta cellar this. Oh no, I'm not supposed to be cellaring an Imperial Lager.
So this is a Force Car beer in a 750?
Yeah.
Oh, you haven't ever done that before?
We did it once before. We did it with the beer we did. So we did a beer called 99 for Warren Sapp. And it was a kind of a hoppy blonde ale, a hoppy Belgian blonde, and that we also force carved. But it's very rare for us to do it. You're completely accurate with that. Listen, we love bottle conditioning. If I could, everything would have 4 volumes of CO2 in it because I apparently I'm a maniac. Yes, when it comes to carbonation. So that makes perfect sense to me.
That's awesome.
So what is your connection with Florida that brings you down here?
So, well, right now I'm back in Canada, but the connection primarily always. So, long story short, I guess I'm from Australia. I moved to Canada in 2010.
You're from Australia? I would have never guessed.
Never, right? Yeah, no mind tonight. So you'd be surprised how many people don't even think about it. Like we'd be watching movies or TV, whatever. My girlfriend would be like, "Oh, that person's Aussie." She's like, "Really?" I just feel like people don't even twig. So we moved to Montreal, and a big thing in Quebec. We were there for 10 years, and then we just moved back out here to Ontario. But in Quebec, they have, I guess you guys are familiar with the snowbirds. It's like a big thing, and they'd all drive down Florida 6 months and then come back to Canada. So I always thought, like, it just seemed kind of like, I don't know, I'd been to Miami and 20 years ago, didn't love it because I only stayed in South Beach. South Beach is not Miami. And I was sort of never interested, just never really felt like my vibe. And just over the last few years, it just felt like, well, it's the hottest place we can go to within driving distance. So we're like, all right, let's check it out. And fortunately, last we hired 2 people for our business. We have a social media agency, and they happen to be they originally lived in Boynton, and then they moved up to West Palm. So we were just starting getting interested. We're like, oh, this is maybe the universe telling us Florida might be a place we need to spend time in. We'd already been thinking about it, and they hired them. And we were like, you know what? We want to film an online course. We wanted to do it for a while. We have a YouTube channel for our agency, and it's growing pretty slowly, and we want to take it to the next step. You know what it's like. You try to do something big like that. It's hard to kind of make time in your schedule. So we were like, well, if you want to escape the early spring, whatever time we went in April, so it's kind of still spring, but weather's still pretty shit here. We were like, let's just drive. We got a dog. It's annoying. Flying with him would be a whole ordeal anyway, and we would have needed a car. So we were just like, let's just drive down there, pay for an Airbnb, and it'll make do this course. So we just did that in April, and it was amazing, man. Like I know it's easy to love somewhere when you're looking at it from outside, and we're like, maybe we're not gonna like it, but everyone was so nice. It was just the opposite. It made me kind of just annoyed. I feel like media and everything is just full of shit. Like everyone, like we didn't see no Florida, and I know we were mostly in Miami, but we didn't see all these bad things that everyone said. Everyone was nice. Like it was just no. There wasn't 1 second I felt sketched out, and I'm pretty, I don't know, aware of when things start to change. I'm like, oh, we're gonna get out of here. Like that didn't even happen one time. So.
Not even driving, because people drive like maniacs in Miami.
Maniacs, not in the city as much as the I-95. Like the 95,
95 is a death trap.
Like, I noticed that like essentially every car had some sort of dent, scratch thing going on. So I'm like, all right, well, this said, and we asked the Uber driver, I'm like, what is fucking up with this city, bro? Like, what is happening? He was like, it's all Latinos. They just don't care. They just do what they want. And he's like, always expect the person in front of you and next to you to do something stupid, and you'll be okay. I'm like, took that advice to heart.
So I moved down here in 2003, I believe. And within like the first week that I was down, I was driving on a 4-lane major road, 4 lanes in each direction. So 8 lanes total. So busy road, probably a 50-mile-an-hour speed limit. And I almost rear-ended a person who was in the far right lane with their turn signal on, trying to make a turn into a turnaround on a 50-mile-an-hour street across 3 lanes of traffic. And I was dumbfounded. I said, who are you? What alien society have you come from? Welcome to Earth, but please stop doing this. And it just got more crazy from there. So yes, the driving is pretty nuts, but I find it so interesting. And we talked a little bit when you visited the brewery, because you thought about maybe relocating or doing some split time and really enjoying it. And in the back of my head, I'm like, we're going to get you on the podcast at some point. And Mike is here. Mike has He grew up here. Most of his life he spent in Florida. He has some very good friends here, and he despises this state with a passion undying. So I thought there would be a nice juxtaposition of you going, "Hey, I'm interested in coming down here," and Mike basically putting up red flags and stop signs, going, "No, stay away."
I mean, all you have to say is Ron DeSantis, really. As I'm like, do you really want to deal with that? But I'm originally from the Northeast, from the Philadelphia area. My wife and I, we moved up there a few years ago for a year before we had to come back because of family issues with her folks just being a little aged, so coming down and being supportive family. All right. But I mean, I try to look at stuff with rose tinted glasses, and I do love certain aspects of West Palm. That's where I live, and I live pretty close to downtown, and there's some awesome businesses down here, restaurants, bars, that I try to be as supportive of as I possibly can. And then it's like, oh, there's people running red lights. Oh, that bicyclist almost got ran over. Like, no one gives a fuck. It's just such a shithole that I just keep on trying to be nice about. But
I get it, bro.
To each their own, I guess. But it's
okay.
I don't hate it as much as I used to. Like, I'm not like, I need to get the fuck out of this state as soon as possible. Like, I know that I won't be here the rest of my life, but I try to be finding good where I can.
I'm just going to suggest real quick, maybe you guys just swap, because, that could work out really well for both people involved. But I do want to mention the fact that this is called United We Drink, not United We Talk About the places that we want to live. So I'm really interested, Craig, in you were down here, you were drinking a bunch of great beer, you were hitting up breweries, you stopped by, you hung out with me for a little bit. I want to know what an outsider thinks about the Florida beer scene, because you are, you have not really worked in the beer industry, correct? You're
no, just at bars back in the day.
Yeah, so you are, but you're a beer aficionado. I mean, I know your cred is real. You know what you're talking about, and you're coming in a lot of ways cold. Tell me some of the things you liked about it. What are the places you enjoyed drinking? What impressed you? What didn't you like? Just go off and rant, man. Okay,
so I had no real expectations. All I'd seen was a few breweries that people had talked about that, you guys were talking about before, the Haze Boys, who might be confused by the West and stuff like that. So I posted that I was going, and I asked people for some recommendations. So, like, where do I go? I figured that's the best. Tap the community. We have a decent community behind them. People that gave me recos were like passionate about certain things. So I'm like, okay, that's a good sign. Usually, and I guess I didn't really think about it, that the snowbirds in Quebec, I knew a lot of people who maybe they didn't spend 6 months here, but came here twice a year, came to twice a year. So I was like, all right, there's a bunch of friends or just people I know, like, casually through beer that, like, knew about this stuff. So I got a bunch of recos, and I tapped any as I could. I didn't get out to Tampa, so we stayed in Wynwood. Just, it's called Alapata, right next to it, but you walk to Wynwood, whatever, from there. And we mostly explored Miami and just sort of up and down the, from West Palm down, essentially. So the general impressions is that, and I can say that potentially the weather impacts the beer. Obviously, you go to the Caribbean and you're not getting 14% pastry stouts and hay and all that stuff, because the weather doesn't necessarily get you interested in drinking those things. So the breweries that were making those things, I felt, and I don't know if I'm correct, but I felt that they were a little more restrained than from up north. Like the double IPAs were maybe not as punchy, a little more chill. Once we drove and left, then we went, as soon as we got to Charlotte and Asheville, I was like, oh, okay, this is very different to what we've been drinking for a month.
Interesting.
So, I don't know if that was true. I actually kind of thought you guys could speak to it because you're both from the Northeast as well. maybe because we were there for a month, maybe it just fucked with my palate a bit or something, like the heat, because it was like 30 degrees Celsius pretty much every single day. So I don't know if maybe I wasn't getting all the flavor.
Mike's trying to do Celsius to Fahrenheit in his head right now to realize what the hell we're talking about. No, it's okay. It was.
I don't know. I actually don't know.
80s and 90s.
I will say that is okay. So you mentioned we're both from the north. Mike and I have been in this industry combined like 30 years. Okay. And if anyone, I mean, the people listening to this podcast obviously listen to this podcast, so they know what our opinions are about like heavy adjunct stuff and, one-dimensional stouts and all these kind of things and overly fruited beers. It is shocking to me to hear you, because we've also been down here for a long time with the exception of Mike going off to Philadelphia for a short period of time. It is shocking to hear you say that like the pastry stouts are restrained, because now I am terrified for the rest of the world. What other beers are out there, and how many more coconuts can you put in it? It is
haze than the pastries. Just
okay.
Because they have much. Yes.
Okay.
The way I look at it with the pastry stout is I almost feel like Florida is responsible for the pastry stout, and Kevin is at least 25 to 50% responsible for it, from his days at Funky Buddha. But it's the haze stuff. Like it is funny. Like I've traveled a good bit around this country, and haze, I feel like there are some breweries that do it okay, and there are a lot of breweries here, and yeah, they don't use the right yeast, or they aren't using fresh hops, or I don't know what else they could be fucking up with it. They just don't know what the fuck they're doing. But I mean, it is kind of funny, yeah, hearing you say the pastry stout's kind of restrained. I want to know what is an over the top one at that point. But
I did only try one at Tripping Animals, and I didn't have much of it because I was driving, but I did bring a bunch back.
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't gotten into them yet. Tonight's actually, I always have 1 week, which is tonight, but I wanted to have this beer, but I normally would only do big beers tonight. Like big stouts is all I really do, because if I don't allocate time for it, the set will just shrink. So I will have something bigger later tonight, and I will get into those ones, and I'll let you guys know. But I was more, because I didn't really drink too many, it was more the haze. I expected the haze to be punchier, but I believe I've had this opinion for we've been back, I don't know, 3-4 weeks something, and I was asking around, and people seem to say that if I went to Tampa, it would have been a different story. So it could have just been maybe around Miami, they're not as crazy.
That's definitely possible. One of the things I want to ask you about is, we are in our little bubble, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to get your interpretation of our little beer culture. When you're talking about those hazy beers, one of the things that I've seen, and this is, I'm not going to, we don't mention breweries here. I don't think it's a kind thing to do, but there's a handful of, breweries that do really heavily hop beers in South Florida. And I find a lot of vegetal flavors coming off them. I find a lot of like straight spice, peppercorn, stuff like that, which to me is coming directly from overhopping a lot of plant material being left inside the beer. And what the mentality is basically like, well, if 4 pounds a barrel, or I mean, back in my day, it was, Jesus, how old am I? Back in my day, 1.5 pounds a barrel was like a big deal. And then it's like, now it's like, oh, we got to do 6 pounds a barrel to make the beer work. I feel like it's not understanding what the chemistry is and not understanding how you actually pull those flavors, and you just hop to high heaven. Are you seeing, when you're talking about like those punchy flavors and the tropical fruit, are you seeing those in like, your different travels throughout the US, maybe up in Canada? Are you getting more of that tropical fruit expression? Was that some of the difference you were seeing?
Yes, that was definitely one part of it, and the moment I realized that things were different was when we went to Burial in Asheville. Like, oh, okay, like they're like, and then we got here and drinking. I brought back such an insane amount that I'm going to be drinking that stuff for for a little longer, so I haven't had as much Canadian beer since I've been back. But ones I have had were more like that sort of, and in Charlotte, Resident Culture and Salute service area, and then we went to Triple Crossing in Richmond and the Vale. So all of that was a lot more bolder. You know how like you can get the haze that you would describe maybe more as murky, and it's murky mostly because of the yeast, and I feel like the yeast a lot more flavor. Some of the other ones I had more in Florida were just a little more. I keep using the word restrained. I'm not even sure if it's the right word, but I did notice some of the vegetal peppery type of stuff that I didn't love. It just felt like it almost tasted like they were old, and I don't know if they were old, if that makes sense. Like a lot, it felt like the flavor had dropped out of some of the ones. Now it wasn't. I'd absolutely not say anything was shit. It was. I think my expectations were sort of. I expected, everywhere in the States has a phenomenal beer. There's basically nowhere that has terrible beer. I think you can always find great beer. The best country in the world for it. It has to be. So maybe had higher expectations and didn't really consider a few things. And I went to a bunch of stuff. I mean, all the ones I went to, I enjoyed. We stayed around the corner from J. Wakefield. Went to Trippin' Animals. I went to Three Sons. Of course, Barrel of Monks, phenomenal brewery. Went to. Where else did we go?
I paid him a lot to say that, by the way. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I went to Gatlin Hall.
Did you go?
It was literally down. Yes, I was going to text you. I forgot. We got distracted. So because we were in a rush, we got there so late. But we stayed. It was like a 3-minute drive. The hotel just up the street, and I checked where it was. I'm like, perfect. So I had the Pilsner there. Fantastic. We went to Ellipse. Well, that was really good. Their haze was great in Orlando, by the way. That haze. I only had one from each brewery. Where else did we go? Fuck. I went to Union Beer Bar in Little Haiti. That was really fun. That was a beer bar that two particular dudes out here in Ontario and Quebec told me about very passionately. Love that. That was just fun. Had some interesting stuff. They had a bunch of other half, which probably drank there, but I probably shouldn't have really bothered doing much just since they can get, it's just they went in Buffalo. It's 50 minutes from here type shit. But I'm drawing a blank to where else I went right now, but those were the main ones, and everything was pretty sweet. One thing that did annoy me was that there wasn't many like beer stores to get beer from, and the reason I wanted to go to a beer store was I didn't always want to get 4-packs, and I felt like I came back with so many, and I like by the end of the trip I was kind of bored because I had the same beers I was drinking over and over, and typically here I would never get more than one of anything. It's not really I like to roll. Maybe it's because I do the selfie thing where I, number the reviews and review stuff. It's not so much an untapped, hey, look how many I've done. That's how the podcast started. So I like to review new things and try things. And I feel like because we have a podcast, just like you guys, I feel like it's somewhat of a responsibility for me to have a wide picture of what's going on in all the different places where I'm spending time. So that was one thing and that wasn't just Florida, by the way. Every brewery I went to had to buy 4-packs. Didn't love that, but also completely part of the deal. But yeah, overall, I think it's great, and I think I barely scratched the surface. So I don't know how valuable or valid my opinion really is. My initial, I think 4 weeks is a decent amount of time to spend there, and I really did try to get to a bunch of places. Oh, we went to that Visa Sir place in the next street over from J. Wakefield, but told after the fact that it was a creation of like AB and Bev or something.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of annoyed I went there in the end, but it was fine. It wasn't anything aimed what I was looking for. But I was just trying to soak up beer culture and try and understand. And it seemed like they did have, Florida does have exactly what you boys were talking about. The pastries, they smooth, lots of smoothie sours, by the way, tons of smoothie sours. I was a little shocked by, but then I thought about it and it came back to the water again. Then also you've got
baby.
Hey?
I said fruit. We're in South Florida, people want fruit juice. I mean, people come on vacation, they want to drink a pina colada, right? So pina colada beer and all that kind of stuff is going to go real well.
That's a great point. Smoothies even felt a little restrained too.
What did you think of like the presence of lager beers down here? Because I feel like there's been a lot of push from some breweries to make good quality lagers, whether they be Pilsners or German style, Hellas's and stuff like Dortmunders. I feel like that's really becoming like Kevin has spoken highly of Gatlin Hall's lager program, but like The Tank that he mentioned earlier makes fantastic lagers. Their Pilsner, I think, is great. Green Bench over on the other coast, I think possibly the best lager brewery in the state of Florida.
They do a lot of things well.
Yes. And I like we make a good amount of lagers at our place. I mean, our flagship beer is an amber lager. But I'm kind of curious as to if that's even a thing that's on your radar looking for. Like you seem like you're a guy who likes the hops. I do too, but I wanted to see if you noticed that at all.
I love the question. Actually a huge crispy boy. If I'm going to a brewery, first thing I'm getting is a crispy every single time. So to me, it was very much on my radar. And I was telling Kev, I think, that they had this program from the Czech government taking brewers out for like a week and all around the world. They did a lot in Quebec and Ontario. So they were taking them around Quebec, Czech Republic, introducing them to the different breweries and the different equipment manufacturers, like the folks who do Luca and all that stuff. And we have had an influx of Czech beers out here. I fucking love
Godspeed, right?
Yeah, they're the homies. Like Luca's a genius.
Yeah.
Like they got like 4 Luca taps, and they always have events. They're doing one this weekend with like the Cologne style, with an alt beer and a Kolsch, and you get the little things that keep filling up, the 200 ml things. So I'm used to insanely high quality pilsners, and particularly Czech stuff. That's my jam. So I was looking for that. Now a lot of the Crispies I found were also quite restrained. They were a lot lighter. I'd get a pilsner and it kind of tasted like a light lager, and that happened multiple times until maybe Gatlin Hall. That was one of the best ones I had. So I was very happy I went there, and thank you again for that record, bro. I'm trying to think what else, but every single place I had a crispy. Had a really good a slow pour pills at Three Sons. They do like they didn't have a Luca, but they did like that 3-step where you have to wait like 7 minutes for beer.
You don't need a Luca to do a slow pour. Any faucet can do that.
Yes, I prefer the Luca. In lieu of that, I got a slow pour, and I really enjoyed that one. That one was fantastic. I really kind of felt like there wasn't as many Crispies as maybe I would have hoped for. But no, I think it's solid. I think there's some work to do there. I feel like there'd be like a larger presence of it. I feel like over here we're almost like it going there gave me context to what we have at home, because I'm sort of just used to it. I hadn't traveled in 3 years to the States or to really anywhere. So it was really cool for me to see this. The exploring of it was the funnest part. I missed that. I don't know about you guys, because you're busy just doing your thing, but he hadn't got out, and I forgot what it was like. And I don't even care if it's fire, if it's not. Well, out here, this is fun. I'm in fucking Florida. There's palm trees. This is beautiful. I don't really care if it's not phenomenal. I'd rather it be, but if it's not, it's the experience that counted for me. And I had a really fun time exploring. And I like I said, maybe did less 10 because it wasn't part of the trip. I tried to do as many as possible. Maybe I'm forgetting something, but yeah, I feel like the crispy boy side of things, I feel like I have to see more of that out there. And I imagine it's just a matter of time before that picks up. It's like the breweries have to keep making it. I felt like the breweries out here went to the deck, then came back and just started making them, and just kind of like, hey, we're doing this shit now. You're gonna bloody like it, and that's the vibe I got. Now,
yeah, when Kevin went up there, I recommended to him that if you see a Godspeed beer, you should drink it. I've never even had one, but I follow them. And I love what they're doing. Max, their director of marketing, is a guy who we're friends on Twitter. But their owner, he's from
he's from
Gatineau,
they make
Quebec. Pêche Mortelle.
Yeah, due to CL. So he's from Gatineau, Luke, but they call him Bim. But yes, and he didn't come up with the recipe for it, but he
he worked there, yeah.
Yeah, so he came up with a bunch of their recipes, and he opened breweries in Japan. I think something even in Brazil, and he chose Toronto to do Godspeed. And he opened Godspeed at a time when it was the peak of the haze sort of like hype stuff. And he went and opened with the Dortmunder, an American pale, and I think it was the Yuzu Saison. Like it wasn't anything anyone cared about. And I remember trying.
That was amazing.
Like, I'm sure you would have been like, oh, fuck yeah. When I got it all, I bought only 2 of each because I wasn't sure at the time. And I remember I drank one of everything and I traded the rest. I'm like, I don't want this. And in hindsight, I was just not ready for it. And I feel like Godspeed got me to that place where now I like whenever they drop anything, they got that 45 heck pitch line barrel from Pilsner Urquell. So they do their Sklepnik pills, which is their version of Pilsner Urquell. Then they do wood version. So they chuck it in the thing, the barrel, and let that bad boy sit for whatever. And then you can do side by sides of like the wood version and the OG. And it's just such an experience, man. Love it so much. I'm glad to hear that you guys are on top of it. Next time, I'll bring you some shit. Like, we'll be back in January.
I need to point out that Mike's on top of it. I am not, and I did not have a chance to have any of that when I was in Toronto, which is funny because for anyone, obviously no one else knows this, but you and I, Craig. But I went to Canada for my wife's conference and for a family visit at the exact same time you were coming down to Florida, which was a really odd juxtaposition. But I do want to transition into talking about the Canadian beer scene, and I also want to say real quick is that one of the things I respect about talking to you and the conversations we've had, and I've been on your podcast, and you were by the brewery, and we're talking obviously right now, is that you had expectations of what you thought Florida was going to be and what these breweries are going to be, and I think you from what I gauge with you, you judged it reasonably. It wasn't just judged on the hype, judged on what you were expecting. You drank the beers, enjoyed the beers you enjoyed, maybe didn't love the beers you didn't love. And that's a really hard thing because when you get expectations, right, it's really easy to say, well, this is supposed to be good, so this is good. And when you are from an area that's making beer, it's really easy to be a homer and say, well, this is the beer from my hometown, so it must be the best beer in the world. So you've, over the time, have developed a lot of street cred with me. I trust you when you tell me that some beers are good. So tell me what's going on in the brew scene around you, the Canadian brew scene. I know Canada's a big country. You don't necessarily go to Vancouver every day. But what's going on in Canada?
I appreciate the kind words, man. You're a G. The Canadian scene, so going to Florida also gave me some context about what's happening at home. And what's happening out here now is pretty phenomenal. And I don't know exactly what happened. My guess is that, I feel like over the pandemic, it just got better and better. So in the scenes I'm most familiar with are Ontario and Quebec. So I'm just outside of Toronto now in a city called Hamilton, and I was in Montreal for 10 years, and I trade with her from Vancouver, so I'm relatively familiar with, what's happening out there. So it's pretty fucking phenomenal. I'm really proud of what they've all done. Or I always felt like I just needed to come here to the States to get stuff and bring it all back, and really didn't drink a ton of Canadian beer. I did, but whenever I could, I would drink American beer over Canadian beer, no question. Now I feel like we're in a position where stuff that we're making at home is pretty fucking world class. It could stand up to anything I had on that entire trip. And I went to some pretty, renowned boundaries on the way. I configured the trip to do that. And so I'm super proud, man. I mean, from Quebec they were really low on the hype, and when I was there, it pissed me off, bro. I always used to come to Ontario my girlfriend's from Toronto, so her mom's there. My brother lives literally 50 meters from Godspeed, so I'd always go to see him, go to Godspeed, and go to different places. I bring him always back to Quebec. So Quebec, all of a sudden, I think it was 2018, 2019, just hit the button with Massorum. There's a brew called Massorum Brassatorium. They really cut it. Another one called Pub Brewski, and they just started going crazy with all the hype, because Quebec was known, like you mentioned, Mike, with Dieu de Ciel, who do Chez Mortel, which is either sort of year-round coffee stout, at least in Canada. I don't know about the world, but very, very widely renowned, and rightly so. Always bad boy stocked. It's disgustingly good. And I always felt like they did all that stuff, barrel-aged stouts, all the wild stuff, all the barrel-aged sours and all that stuff really, really well. And then when it came to anything else, it was kind of mid. But then Quebec just exploded. Brewski did the first smooth in Quebec, in Canada, even beyond. And Quebec just started super, super impressive. Ontario, I always felt were a little slower. They weren't as hot with, say, some of the barrel-aged stuff, and they were a little quicker to get on the hype with breweries like Bellwoods, Barncat, things like that. But I feel like now that I live here, in Ontario, and I'm drinking more Ontario beer. I'm not getting as much Quebec beer as I used to because I don't go. When I lived in Quebec, I went to Ontario all the time, so I had the best of both worlds. Now I'm not getting as much of their stuff, and I feel like Ontario beer is phenomenal as well. Like this is well asked. Like out here, there's Badlands and Third Moon. They are just the greatest two breweries in the country, in my opinion, aside from Godspeed with the Crispies. Just insane haze, like insane. Like even like, you know, I know your palate, Kevin, and I even think that you would be like, all right, fuck, this is good. It's just, it's really impressive to me, particularly to just come back from like, I didn't know who Burial was there, and I went there, multiple people like, yo, you went, like lost them that I'm there. So I was like, okay. And I was equally impressed with their stuff. People told me that after the fact. I just went there not expecting anything, like, all right, this was phenomenal. So I feel like what we're doing is on par with some of the best now, and I didn't think that before. So it's a really good time, and I don't know, maybe it was like the pandemic, and they just had to put their heads down and work and tweak and get better, stay in business. And they just ended up just making phenomenal beer, and I'm very proud of everybody here, man. Like there's some really good people in beer everywhere, as you both very well know. So I would, you know, if anyone hasn't been to Canada for a while or has some sort of maybe conception about what Canadian beer is like, I feel like globally never really got the rep. I would very much suggest, particularly Americans, because I think that you guys would be the most impressed because you've got the best in the backyard, basically wherever you live. I would highly recommend anyone. And Vancouver's just crazy as well. I feel like they do a lot of West Coast out there. Here it's not as big. That's why Saint-Guillaume Baron in Quebec there, they do the best in my opinion. Aside from Vancouver, their shit is crazy. They got crazy haze, they got great crisp out there, but they're not really big on smoothies, not really big on pastries, stuff like that. So each scene is very different, but really unique. Like it's a great position, man. It's an exciting time in beer.
So Canada's not strange brew all the time is pretty much what you're saying.
Not anymore, at least. Not all
people that reference.
Deep.
No, I've never been to Canada. I so want to. There's so much like from Vancouver all the way over into the Maritimes. Like there's so much that I want to see just from a purely like tourist standpoint. I just love beautiful landscapes, and if you can drink a nice beer while you're doing it too, that's a perk. And that was something you were saying earlier, is sometimes just if you're enjoying the setting that you were in, amplify that beer, even if it's maybe a mediocre beer, it can make it taste good to you if you're in a good setting and you're just enjoying where you're at and doing. And you know, there's no harm in that at all. Like if a brewery makes some money off of a so-so beer and keep going by having people come in and enjoy a great setting, can we really fault them for doing something like that?
You know, obviously we'd want good beer, but
yeah.
Well, I think one of the important aspects of this is that, you know, my brewery comes from a very traditional brewing tradition as far as Belgian beer goes. And I'm reading more and more articles about, you know, the hop revolution in Belgium. And they're actually using thiols and thiolized yeast, and they're doing all these different things. And we make these blanket statements about an area, about the U.S. as a whole, because it's easy to do that, especially when you're outside of the country. I remember seeing this amazing like map, like the U.S. as drawn from like a Brit's perspective, and it's like, you know, Texas, Oklahoma, and all those states as like yeehaw, and then you know, Florida as like don't go here, and everything in the Northeast is New York. Like, you don't really understand countries that you don't live in and you don't experience. It's really easy to overgeneralize what somebody does and compartmentalize and not compartmentalize, like say like, oh, well, you know, what's going on the West Coast is the same what's going on in the East Coast. I'm sure it's the same thing with Canada. Like, you can make great beer everywhere. the ingredients travel. It's not like wine where you have to be in the wine country and you have to have a certain latitude and longitude to grow a certain kind of grape varietal. You can get the best malts you can wherever you think those come from. They can be shipped to your door. You can get the best hops you can. They can be shipped to your door. You can get yeast shipped to your door. You can do water profiles. So as long as the brewers are the ones that are on the cutting edge trying to do new and interesting things, you can make world-class beer in your freaking garage. So it's exciting to see your passion about that. And I did not, when I visited when I was in Toronto, I did not get a chance to go to Godspeed. I did not get the chance to really experience that beer culture well, because that's what was not what I was there for. But there was a handful of local breweries that were borderline commercial, really well known, that I loved the beers that I tried from there, that probably no one's going to go, oh my God, you got so lucky to try that organic amber ale. And I'm like, that was really goddamn good. And I really enjoyed drinking it. And it meant a lot to me to be able to go out and try those really interesting beers that I just don't have access to.
I guess that comes back to what I was saying before about having fun just exploring, right? Like, because it's new. It's like, you never know what you're going to discover, and that's the point. And like, unlike wine, like my girlfriend has a wine and spirits Instagram account. We used pre-pandemic, we used to work with tourism offices and travel and do all things, like beer, spirits, wine, and coffee. So do liquid trips essentially. And like, if she's going to roll the dice on a bottle of wine, she's dropping minimum, like at a winery, like you probably not really going to spend less than $20-$30 on the lowest low end. That could be hot garbage, whereas we can spend a few bucks on a can of beer, and it's like, if it's terrible, drain it, take the loss, move on. So it's like it's a very like approachable kind of hobby to explore, like financially at least. Like, it's not like the biggest drain in the world to be able to do that. And if you do your research and you know what you already like, you should be able to find something to your taste anywhere you go. Sometimes there's shit breweries that get hype, like you said, local heroes that everyone bats for that, don't really deserve it, but people just love them. Or, like you were saying, Mike, they're in a beautiful setting and they make kind of mid beer, but fuck, you're sitting by a river on this deck and there's trees and it's beautiful. So there's a bit of thing. I really much I missed that exploration and just how fun it was. Like, it's fucking exhausting. By the end of the trip, I was like, get me home. I don't want to see a brewery for weeks. Which I think literally within a couple of days I was at the brewery, but still, like, it was maybe different from trailing. I'm like, I know I don't have much time and there's a little bit of pressure. I'm like, all right, well, I got to try maybe something, see if the haze is good, see if the crispy is good, then make a quick decision, which be on a take back to try and get something different. Like, it's a lot, but it's a lot of fun. It was really cool to discover it, and I'm excited to spend time and sort of get to know more about the other side, the West Coast, Florida stuff, and just dabble into all the other breweries that we didn't really get to. One thing we did learn, because we did a vlog, which I was filming there with Kev when like in different everywhere we went, just sort of like putting it all together, just like where to drink craft beer in South Florida. And we were about to include Orlando, and we looked it up, like, oh, that's Central Florida, and we had to stop filming and didn't do the end of it yet. So I feel like there's just so much to discover.
This state is gigantic, really.
Yeah,
like
it
doesn't
fucking massive.
look it because it's kind of like weird and penis shaped, but like it is a really big, like, to go from like Key West to Pensacola, it's probably at least 12-13 hours, and you're changing time zone. The far west of the Panhandle's in the different time zone. It's like we have our own little like different micro worlds within this world. Like, yeah, the west coast of Florida, the Tampa Bay area, is so different than South Florida, even though there are some similarities. Like there's so much cool stuff on the west coast that, yeah, with the next time that you're over there, I bet you'll see like, oh wow, it's so different over here.
Yes, and that's what we wanted to soak up, because kind of like Kevin, like I was telling Kev, that we were looking to split time, and we are convinced, and we're already moving on that right now to figure out what that looks like. But we wanted to just see if we liked it, and we were really proactively trying to check neighborhoods and see what's going on, to see like, do we like this? Could we spend 5.5 months there or whatever without? Like, I see what you're saying, Mike, and I had heard so many terrible things, and the driving sucks, and I really don't want to be around that, but honestly, the weather and the palm trees and kind of trump everything. It just gets you when you're not around it, and you boys both know because you spend a lot of time out this way. It's beautiful out here, it really is. But fuck me, man, January through April is just kill yourself, dude. It's even like not even hot right now. Like I couldn't really tell you the temperature because maybe you wouldn't get. It's in like the teens still in Celsius, which got to be like 50s, 60s probably.
Yeah.
Like it's like what we just came back from 30 degrees Celsius every day, which is really hot. And then you come into this, and it's been like it's been tough to adjust. You get used to it, man. After a month, there's some week from like it really like you closer to living somewhere almost how you feel about it. So I know there's everywhere has their downside. Canada's amazing too. It the weather is it's probably his worst feature. Day.
Well, that's definitely true, and the weather you're dealing with is very similar to what I dealt with in Detroit growing up, and that's one of the reasons why I escaped to South Florida. Listen, I'm going to say this: I want you to come spend some time down here just to have one more cool cat in the state that I can talk good beer with. So that's selfishly my desire. But listen, one thing I want to talk about. We're going to have to wrap this thing up at some point. We're going to have to get into last calls, but. One of the things that probably no one, or that I shouldn't say no one, some people might listen to your podcast as well. I hope people do check out the BAOS podcast if you're a fan of United We Drink. But you are not only into hip hop, you're a hip hop artist, right? And
that's what
we've talked a little hip hop in the past, not a lot. But recently I was listening to an episode of yours, and you guys were talking about hip hop, and we're in the same age range. I don't know what your tastes are, but I want to find out what your tastes are. And I'm going to do a little rapid fire here. I'm going to give you an either or with some hip hop artists from what I consider my generation. I'm talking about like early to mid 90s is where kind of a lot of actually, I think I'd say more like mid 80s to mid 90s is where my tastes in hip hop really lie. And you just tell me what your vibe is. Okay. Rakim or KRS-One?
Rakim for me. But to be fair, I got him off the album, so that's a much late. Even
you broke up. You broke up right there, and I need to know what you were saying because I really care. I don't care about any of this beer shit. We're talking about real shit now. Say that again about Rakim.
I got into Rakim around the album called The Ain't, which was Guess Who's Back, that song, yeah, which is classic. But I missed a lot of stuff. Yeah, it's okay. Brilliant stuff. I'm aware of. I think you and I are the same age. I'm born 81, so I'm old, but I got into it, really, really into hip hop, like 91, 92. So I wasn't proactively listening to it in like 88, 87, but I'm familiar with it because I was obsessed and was trying to get in touch with everything. But I listened to a bit of KRS as well, but I would say that Rakim trumped him. Definitely one of the best lyricists.
I'm right there, and also 18th Letter is one of the most like underrated hip hop albums of the 90s because it was just lyrically off the fucking charts. Okay, De La Soul or Tribe Called Quest?
Interestingly, I wasn't ever huge on either of them. I probably have owned one album of each. I think I own Midnight Marauders and Stakes is High. I would probably say De La. Stakes is High is such a classic, and I went and revisited it because they just, I mean, rest in peace, Dave, but they just got all of their music on streaming. I don't know if you guys saw that, and they did that show. They had Dave Chappelle hosted it. It was this beautiful launch where they counted down to midnight when their music went on streaming. They've been fighting Tommy Boy for like, I was going to say a decade, probably not that long, but many, many years. So I listened to Stakes is High. I'm like, fucking hell, this is a classic album. I would say De La would edge him out.
So just so you know, Mike actually did one of the best beer promos for Midnight Marauder Black IPA. He took the Midnight Marauder album when we worked at Due South Brewing and put all our faces on it. It was pretty fucking hip. Last question, the best solo Wu-Tang album?
Cuban Links or Liquid Swords? I'm going to go Cuban Links.
That's a good job. I go Liquid Swords. But Cuban Links is classic too.
I kind of feel like I liked, yeah. I'd have to just say that. Though Liquid Swords has less skips because Cuban Links has a few like these interludes and a few songs I'm not like Heaven or Hell. I wasn't really into that, but when they like ice cream, obviously, and frustrated discusses that shit like A1 like masterclass shit.
The early stuff, the first like 6 solo albums were all hits. Method Man's first album, ODB's first album. I mean, every one of them was a fucking banger. But yeah, I mean, Liquid Swords to me is like next level shit. But yeah, you know what? See, I knew I liked you, and now I was just trying to confirm this because I was trying to decide if you do split time in Florida, are we going to hang out? And now it's a definite.
Now we can drink traditional beers and listen to Wu-Tang.
Listen, I will. Especially like that generation of hip hop, I could listen to it all day long, man. We could have some really cool conversations.
Love it. Oh, Mike, sorry.
There's a Chinese restaurant in Philadelphia that used to do. I think they started doing it again. Beer dinners with Wu-Tang music. Where they would pair a course with a Wu-Tang song with a beer, and they like always sold out. Like I've never been to one, but I've always read about it. How they had these awesome Wu-Tang beer dinners with they're like a dim sum restaurant. And it's always something that I've wanted to go to. Like I would never consider myself a super fan. Like I appreciate and love what Wu-Tang has done for music, and I love their music. But it just sounds like such a cool concept of something to do, and I would just love to see people who really love it enjoying it. Like I sometimes get pleasure out of seeing other people love things. Like I don't know. It's nice to see people get really amped up about something that they're super into.
I've just spent the last minute trying to figure out what I would pair Protect Your Neck with, and I'm for some reason I'm thinking ESB. I don't know, but now I want to think about this all the time.
Something sharp and aggressive.
Yeah.
Maybe this is one of your next throwdowns, Kevin. You're welcome.
He's sharp and aggressive, though. That was a good point, right? That maybe a West Coast IPA.
There we go. That's what it is. I was trying to think of something. I'm like, that's exactly what it is. But like old school, like tongue, like palate cart. What's it called? Palate wrecker. The green.
Yeah. There we go. This is a thing, guys. I know Mike, you just stole this from a place in Philly, but let's steal this and do it.
About to be a thing in South Florida. God damn it.
I mean, South Florida is really good at stealing things from people.
Taxes?
Yeah.
I heard the property taxes were really high. Because everyone talks about
insurance is really where the fuck you in the ass part is right now.
And property taxes will kick your ass too. I mean, it's one of the things about being down here is unless you're doing really well financially, it's hard to fucking live day to day. It's a real problem that gets it seems to get worse every 30 minutes, unfortunately. Not to keep bashing Florida. We do that enough.
That's our other podcast, bashing Florida.
Called Florida Go Fuck Yourself. We only have a few listeners.
It's okay.
But they're passionate.
Former residents.
Mike, are we going to go into last calls here? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah. This is the part of the show where we give each other an unspecific amount of time to talk about whatever it is that we want. Unopposed, unobjected, uninterrupted. We have a guest on the show, so we're going to let Craig go first. Craig, what is your last call?
So I was having a little trouble thinking of something that I was trying to think something timely. Well, rest in peace, Tina Turner, first of all. That happened today, which is super sad. She was huge in Australia, so that was she seemed very graceful. What's the word? A lot of dignified woman. So rest in peace to her. But the funnest thing was to kind of like piggyback off that kind of the hip hop convo and on the other podcast that you're referring to, Kev, with one of my friends in the beer industry in LA, we were talking about our top fives. He just brought it up randomly. It wasn't planned on. We just kind of got lit, and you know how it goes. You guys, of course, know how it goes with beer podcasts. So we started talking about top five rappers. So I'd love to know. I know maybe Mike, if you might not have a top five rappers or like top five bands is cool too. But I just think it's a fascinating conversation in people's top fives because it's always like there's always like an artist that like like just did something for you at a specific time that got you through a part of your life or whatever. Most of our memories I think with music are imprinted on us in our like formative years, like the teen years. So it's like what you were listening to then, nothing could ever really beat that. So it's always just a fun convo, and sometimes it's fun if you start arguing about it, but I just still think there's like when it's more like what's the word, subjective top five. I'd love to hear what you guys got.
This is the first ever interactive last call, and I love it. And I don't know if Mike's going to have anything, and I have not thought about this, but I'm going to throw you mine, then
Please.
give Mike a few more seconds to think of his.
Yes.
I'm going to go with, and this is going to show my age, Rakim, KRS-One, Tupac. Then I've got to go with...
No, it's tough. I know.
I'm going to go with Nas
Great one.
and Mos Def.
That's an eclectic list.
Black on Both Sides, one of the greatest albums of all time, bar none, period, end of story. The Black Star album with Talib Kweli, probably like the two biggest slam dunks back to back anyone's ever had as far as like the way they presented themselves in the hip hop community. So there's my five.
Love that. We opened for Mos Def in 2013 in Montreal.
Really?
I didn't get to meet him, unfortunately, because he just sort of like was ushered in the back door, and then he wasn't in the green room. We were waiting, like, come on, please.
Mike, you got anything?
I mean, because I'm not a hip hop guy. Like if you just let me do my top five bands. It's tough, but I'm going off my number one favorite band of all time is a band called Botch from Tacoma, Washington, who just reunited after almost 20 years of being broken up, and are going on tour. They did a couple reunion shows in Washington State recently, and they're going on tour this year. And I'm going to Philly in November to go see their show there. A band called Coalesce from Kansas, metalcore band from there. Tom Waits, who a lot of people might know of him. He's a kind of eclectic guy, but he's been making music since the 70s, and he's an actor as well. Just an all over the place weird dude, but I fucking love him. Never have had the chance to see him live. Godspeed You Black Emperor, a Canadian band from Montreal, an instrumental band who, strangely enough, I kind of thought that Godspeed Brewery might be quasi named after, and I just read a interview recently with the owner who's like, we're not, but we are, but we are not. And I was like, that's the best answer I could have ever seen for that. And I would also say a band called Darkest Hour, a death metal band from Washington, D.C. I've just always enjoyed stuff like them. I've probably forgotten someone, but put on the spot, I just named 5 bands, musicians that I fucking love.
Are you familiar with Cryptopsy at all? They're a death metal band from Montreal.
I believe I do. I think I do know that. Like they have one of those very stylized logos that you can't really read, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think I do know who they are. Yeah.
So the singer of that band, he's the second singer. So there was an original dude called
I think I do
Worm.
know. Yeah, who you're talking about now.
So he reached out to me a few years ago. He's like, hey, I'm Matt McGackie. I'm a singer in a band called I don't listen to metal. So I'm like, sweet. And he started a beer podcast. So now he's a craft beer podcaster.
Oh, really?
So he became a really good friend of mine. we did so much work together. He's a fucking legend. He's a hustler, and it's really funny because a lot of the beer community are metal people, which is why I really enjoy talking about rap with beer people because it's very few and far between. And it's so funny because to me, I don't have any. He's just Matt. He's just the dude. But I see that people lose their fucking minds when they meet him at beer festivals or different beer events. Like they always they get giddy. It's very, very funny. I wasn't sure.
I think the complete opposite of you. I feel, at least in Florida, I feel like so many people are hip hop, like because everyone's ripping off IP from hip hop artists down here, and like I'm like, no one's really doing that to metal bands. But I feel like at least in Florida, like the hip hop brewers are way more plentiful than metal or punk dudes like me. But
noticed that in the groups I went to, Phil. You go and like because we would before all this we do Ask the Virtual now too, and we're doing them all in person. And you go there and they'd be playing metal in the brewery, and the people working there were all obviously metalheads, and it was just so like, and then very occasionally there'd be, I can think of maybe one or two out here, whereas like everywhere in the States was a bit of a mix. I found, and Florida had more than usual, which is cool. It's exciting for me.
I might have missed something, but did you pass your last call on to Mike and I and not actually do your version of the last call? This is unprecedented. I think what it is that I know you're a transplant, but you're from Canada. It's a little bit upside down. You did a last call by getting us involved. I think you've got to give us something before we get out of here.
I want to also apologize for that because that's what Canadian would do. I'm sorry, guys. Sorry. All right. What are you talking about? So, my top 5 anyway. My favorite rapper of all time is Kanye West. Favorite producer, I think he's the best. Problematic things aside, if you can separate that, he's just the GOAT. There's no denying that for me. Fonte from Little Brother, if people are familiar. I think he's the other rapper who inspired me the most for music. Like Kanye, listening to him in like 2002 before he even came. So he was producing for Jay at the time and Rockefeller artists, Beanie Siegel and stuff. And then College Dropout dropped in 2004. At the time, in that era, there was a bunch of leaks. It was the freestyles, but also the early demo leaks of what became College Dropout. So that getting all of those, and that inspired the music we make to this day. So it's sort of happened to be into that early. Fonte, Royce the 5'9" from Detroit. Just to you, Kev. I think his music isn't the greatest, but I don't know if many people can rap better than him. Maybe Thought for Roots, who is just disgusting, and I don't know if he's ever said anything even really average. And my 5th was Scarface, who is
Scarface number 5.
Number 5. I like
no shit.
Love Scarface. It's like the emotion, and I've read his book and listened to the podcast he has with Willie D and stuff, and like just seeing the way that they grew up and all the things that he's been able to channel through music. Like he always became like it wasn't the mayor of Houston, but he was running for some sort of like public office and he almost won. Just a legend. So the top 5. Now that is like a subjective. I mentioned before, these are subjective. So like very few people would have a top 5 like mine, and probably not so much like yours, Kev. At least in the rap world. On the other podcast with Theo from Crowns and Hops, I was saying that the objective GOAT, because the conversation is the one where people start screaming at each other, which I think is fucking hilarious. But I think GOAT is Jay-Z. I don't think there's anybody who has put more music, has more accolades, has done more for the culture as far as influencer culture, whether it's slang or fashion, or like he was one of the first, to have an alcohol brand and clothing brand with Rockaware, and like just the impact that he's had over time. I don't know if anyone's done it like him. I think there's an argument for a lot of different people, but I feel like, in my opinion, the contested GOAT is Jay for sure. And he's not in my top 5. Technically, he should be, but it felt too lazy. It's like too obvious. Nas, like they're in the top 10, along with like I think I have Lil Wayne, T, somebody else in my top 10. I forgot, but I've had this conversation a number of times, so I had to write it down on my phone so I know it's like a regular thing. But yeah, I feel like Jay is the
Your top 5, you said mine was eclectic. Yours is freaking eclectic, my friend. So I give you props for that. I dig it. Like I said, you come down here. I mean, we could do a phone call every now and then, but I mean, you come down here, we're gonna hang out, we're gonna listen to music, and we'll have some spirited conversations about beer and about hip hop and music in general.
I heard 2 Philly names in there with Benny Siegel and the Roots.
Yes. Philly is. I love Philly. Been there a couple times, and just a phenomenal city. And the music output, not even to mention like Jill Scott, was from Philly.
Yeah,
she's insane. Like the No Soul was just as important to me as the raps. So like yeah, Philly has this sort of like just such interesting people that came from there. There's so many others that I'm on. Eve was from Philly.
Meek.
Yeah, but Meek Mill. Yeah, Meek for sure.
Yeah.
Meek is great. There's other people from like the 90s that I'm completely blanking on, that I'll be embarrassed later that I didn't remember them. But I know that Phil has really put out, like my friends has a
Will Smith.
Boys to Men.
Oh, they are. Fucking love them.
If you don't like Boys to Men, then you're not a real person.
I like the early stuff. Like I was saying earlier, my girlfriend is 25 and we moved here in 3 years ago. So he was a young kid. I'm not really around Gen Z very much. So he thinks Future is the GOAT, but he also appreciates, he's like a mature Gen Z person, I guess. And I've been giving him all of this music to listen to. We have a podcast, him and my brother, where we talk about rap stuff. And one of the things we do is every week we'll give him like an album to listen to. So we give him Cuban Links, Liquid Swords, Love Half-Life, fucking, Brown Sugar, D'Angelo, like all that stuff. And he listens to it all. And now whenever I see him, he has like playlists and he's saying those albums regularly. He knows all the words to Liquid Swords and stuff. I'm like, right, this translates to the kids even. Like if they're open enough to listen to it, like music is objectively classic because it's 20, 30 years old now, held up. If the Gen Z kids are listening to it, that's a really good sign.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I did my last Call of Duties. I wasn't trying to just pass it off.
No, listen, you stepped up. I appreciate it. I just like the fact that we did something completely different with our last call. That was fun. You threw in a wild card, and I like it.
That's what happens.
Kevin, do you want to do one, or do you want to consider that part of your last
I think that was our entire collective last call.
I'm willing to forego.
No, listen. Listen, I could talk to both of you guys for a long time, but at some point, people are going to go, Uncle, it's been an hour and a half. Please go away now. So I'm sensitive to that.
Craig, do you want to plug anything? I mean, yes, you do.
Sure.
Plug your podcast and
plug it away. If you're a craft beer, if you listen to United We Drink, you know that you're into craft beer, and what we try to do with BAOS Podcast is to capture the stories of the craft beer and really get into that. And we primarily focus on Ontario, Quebec, mostly just because that's the home ground. But I'm be spending more time in Florida, so I've had Kevin on twice with both Barrel of Monks and Breed, and we just had Tripping Animals on, which comes out today. Just dropped today, so we're trying to do more from Florida to really focus out there. We've done it all over, all over the country as well. So if people listen back, it's stuff in New York and Cali and Colorado and Vermont, Virginia, and all over. So that is at BA Podcast everywhere. So BOSpodcast.com, at BOS Podcast on social media. It's at BOS. If you search for BOS Podcast, it'll come up. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that stuff. The YouTube channel as well. We're dropping on there. You can check that out. There's some, if you want to just check out some good ass beer. I try to promote the brands and the people that I admire and enjoy and appreciate and value in this, and spread good word about beer. We don't do negative shit. It's all if I don't like it, we won't talk about it. So, just like you were saying, Kev, we don't bash anybody ever. It's not part of the game. We won't be there. That doesn't happen if we go talk shit about them. So it's all positive, all love, great conversations, great people. You can check it out, mate.
Kev, you want to plug anything?
I'd like to plug the BAOS podcast, mostly because I think we should make sure that the episode that I was on ends up being the most listened to in the history of mankind. So everyone go to that episode, listen to that, the main episode, which is just me and Craig talking, but also the one with Oddbreed. But no, it's...
New
what's
series,
that?
episode 76, called episode 76, Implication of a Flavor. Kevin from Barrel Moss.
There we go. No, go check them out. I mean, listen, I had a great time. I've been on a lot of podcasts, including obviously United We Drink, but some of the most fun I ever had, just shooting the shit, talking about beer, was on that show. So, the BAOS, check it out. If you're into beer, you're going to love it.
Appreciate you, man.
I'm gonna just plug my Substack, where I was recently negative. I feel like I'm not following, but I bash CBC in the BA because I feel like CBC is just kind of Club Med for breweries to just go drink their faces off and all of that, and the BA is just collecting all of their money and not really doing a whole lot of shit about that. So go to my Substack; it's free. MikeLovesBeer.substack.com, and you can subscribe to that. And I put stuff out every Monday. I'm working on something, probably be a few weeks out, but a multi-piece series about burnout in the industry, and I'm really looking forward to putting that out there. And then you can follow me at Mike Loves Beer on Twitter and Instagram, and mostly on Instagram. I'm taking pictures of stuff that isn't always beer. You can follow the podcast at United We Drink on Twitter, at United We Drink Pod on Instagram, and we're on all of the lovely services as well: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, blah 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 blah. Craig, thank you so much for coming on the show here with us.
It's been a pleasure, boys. Thank you for having me. This was really, really a lot of fun. I knew this would be great, so I shared it. I love what you're doing. Love the convos. Love the format. I love you both. Your passion for beer. I just followed the Substack, MikeLovesBeer.substack.com. Go check that out. I just follow United We Drink Pod on Instagram. Just right now, I should have been following it. I'm disgusted in myself, but we got there. This was a ton of fun, boys. Thank you so much. Really, really had fun.
Oh,
You're the man,
thanks so
Craig.
much, man.
Thank you for coming on.
Likewise.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys.
One more time, a big thanks to Craig for coming on the show. Make sure you go and check out his podcast, BAOSpodcast.com. That's where you can find his website, plus links to all of their streaming offerings, their social media, and all of that. It was such a fun conversation to have. We barely ever know what is going on with our friends in the Great White North. So it was fun to have someone on and provide some perspective on what the beer market is like in that Ontario, Quebec area. So yeah, go check out their podcast, check out their social, follow them, and be a good person. Again, you can check us out on our social. We're at United We Drink on Twitter, at United We Drink Pod on Instagram. You can find us on Facebook as well. We're on all of those major podcast streaming services such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, wherever fine podcasts are found. If you would like to support the show financially, this is the part where I tell you to go to our website, unitedwedrink.com, and check out the Brands We Love page. We have so many awesome brands up there that we really love, and if you make a purchase through them, we get a little bit of a kickback from them. That's how it helps us. I would especially like to direct you over to Liquid Death, who just released an iced tea line that I fucking love. I love the Armless Palmer. It's their take on an Arnold Palmer. It has way less calories and way less actual sugar in it than any of the big time things like Snapple or anything like that, and tastes just as amazing. So please go check those out. And all of that money, if you do purchase something through one of those brands, goes right to paying for our hosting and things like that. We also have t-shirts, buttons, stickers, patches, totes, and all of that over on our web store, unitedwedrink.com/store. Other than that, we'll be back in a couple weeks with another new episode for you fine folks out there. Thank you once again. We'll see you then. Cheers.